older black generation that I think has almost subscribes to the notion that white people are superior. And that's where the tragedy lies. I mean, we know that's a false dogma. You would think that at this stage there would be some level of desire for equity and sharing of assets, but they just want more and more. And the notion of this Cape independence, I mean, it's just absolutely, that is a explicit example of whiteness unable to confront itself and say, let us share South Africa. We should be grateful as white people that we're still allowed on this land. But what do? We just want to take not only the land, but an entire province.
And what do you think is the reason behind white supremacy? Why do we still have white people who still believe that they are more superior than black people in South Africa?
You know, white supremacy it's actually a very long, we could call marketing campaign. It's been going on for 300 years, centuries, not only in South Africa, but across the world. And white people have used the notion of being superior to conquer, unfairly so, other countries, other races. And I mean, it's a strategy that works for white people because it allows white mediocrity to trump over black excellence time and time again. We see that in a party like the DA, where we have the most ridiculously uneducated and quite stupid man, John Steenhuisen. But when you look at some of the black women who competed against him, they were actually outstanding achievers, very strong, well-educated, knowledgeable, and well-traveled black women. But they didn't stand a chance. So still in South Africa, we have the mantra of do not disturb white supremacy and white privilege. And what's so remarkable is that the ANC government seem to have adopted that. I almost feel it's like the national anthem of the ANC, not to disturb white supremacy. So it's not even about, I mean, white people will always act in their own interests. History tells us that no white person anywhere in the world, no government, has ever handed over power willingly. So we have white people who are holding on to whatever they have. But sadly, we have a black government who's allowing them so. We also have an older black generation that I think has almost subscribes to the notion that white people are superior. And that's where the tragedy lies, not in white people thinking they're better. I mean, we know that's a false dogma, but it breaks my heart when we see black people buying into that notion. And I mean, we see that in everyday life where black people will go into a white supermarket. Black people will consume white media, although the images of black people in mainstream media are shocking. Black people are criminalized. They're seen as poor family representatives. You know, they've always been put down, not only in South Africa. You see that in the US.
Yes.
But yet, black people will still go to white media first. They'll still go to white banks. And I think that's a very sad symptom of the power of white supremacy. And that's what I write about, is that black people have fallen under this. What is encouraging to me, as I look at, I speak as an old white gogo, but when I look at organizations like the EFF and other young organizations, I see that that is falling. White supremacy is frowned upon. We finally met a generation of black South Africans who are saying, no, not in my name.
Yes.
Will I put up with such nonsense? I'm a confident black young person, and the time has come for us to rule, to dominate, to assume our cultural dominance, our intellectual superiority. And that's a beautiful time. I hope I see that in my lifetime.
And indeed, white supremacy is unfathomable. Looking at the EFF stance, looking at the 7 non-negotiable pillars, do you strongly believe that land indeed should be expropriated without compensation?
Without question. I mean, that is the first pillar. In fact, if we don't have land justice, every single other pillar will follow. And I've often said the best way to humble whiteness, which is very arrogant, is to take away land, which doesn't belong to us actually. But a people cannot be economically viable. They cannot be economically in flourish without land. The dignity of the black child is dependent on land. Land is more than an economic entity. It speaks to the soul of a people. So that has to happen. And I mean, it's so disappointing that the ANC has been so reluctant to hand back land. But it tells us a lot. And I must say, just to speak about a personal experience, I was invited, strangely enough, to the ANC Land Summit in 2017, I think. And I was quite appalled at the level of discussion that took place there. They tended to bring in white experts. When we were finally writing critical papers, the scribes, once again, were whites. So the ANC accorded a lot of status to white people speaking about land, which is actually quite ridiculous because we are land thieves. So what I think in the discussion of land, and I've written about this, is that land return must happen without white people. The fact that there's consultation with white people, the land thieves, is ridiculous. A bold government would have just taken land back, actually, and all land, not only land for economic rights, but land for justice, to try and make right some of the historical abuse and genocide, really, that took place when land was stolen from black people.
You talked about the DA being a party that obviously peddles or fuels racism in some parts. Now we understand that in the Western Cape, the DA wants the provincial powers bill. What do you make of the DA's position on that?
Well, I mean, the DA, I've written before about the oxygen of the DA is white supremacy and white privilege. I mean, you can't take out that from, it's like part of their DNA, actually. It's they can't breathe without racism. So, you know, once again, they just want to extract more and more. You would think that at this stage, there would be some level of desire for equity and sharing of assets, but they just want more and more. And the notion of this Cape independence, I mean, it's just absolutely, that is a explicit example of whiteness unable to confront itself and say, let us share South Africa. We should be grateful as white people that we're still allowed on this land. But what do? We just want to take not only the land, but an entire province. And it's quite interesting just to look at this in an international context, where we see the people of Palestine in the same situation, that we have apartheid Israel wanting more and more land. So both struggles, in a way, are colonial struggles. And what we see in South Africa and in Israel, because there's also settlers in that area, which doesn't belong to them, we see the presence, the omnipresence, in fact, of the colonizer in society. So the DA is a colonial party. It subscribes to white supremacy. But sadly, it also represents the mindset of most white South Africans who don't think differently.
Do you think the DA is helping in ending racism? I mean, there are many incidents of racism where the DA is not issuing a statement or taking an action. Now in Limpopo, in Groblersdal, if you have seen that, there was a white farmer, white man, Boers, who were flying the Boer Republic flag after they were appearing in court. What needs to happen to sort of nip these anomalies in the bud?
That's a really good question, and I think the answer is quite complex. So we see racism every single day. I mean, it's a serial thing. That just happens to be a grotesque example of racism. But racism is the water we drink. It's everywhere. It's in the air that we breathe. Perhaps not in this beautiful building named after one of our greatest struggle heroes, Winnie Mandela. But outside of possibly the EFF and some other progressive organizations, racism is everywhere. And we can't expect the DA to end it or issue statements about that because it fuels their growth. They can't survive without the ember of racism. But where I think we as South Africans have to take responsibility is, well, particularly the ANC, which has been the most dismal ruling party. I was a member of the ANC in 1994, and I can't believe how poorly they've managed the country. But mostly because they took a racist system and they didn't make any adjustments to it. So today we have the architecture of apartheid.
EFF's message of One Africa might really encounter a lot of that. We can see that resistance already coming in from within. And I'm sure most of Africans, most of the black populace around the world who seem to resonate with the message of the EFF aren't really conversant with the internal resistance that the EFF seems to be experiencing and how far that would go in that regard. And one thing is for sure, there are many people who have been born and raised and whose only reality seems to be that which has been framed by their understanding of their existence within the South, the space, within the geographical space called South Africa. And to sort of like exclude them from a national consciousness and a wider African consciousness, I think, and I can already see the problems that erupt from that. And that's why many people have termed South Africa as Africa's ticking time bomb, because it's sort of like differs, is more nuanced than most of the politics going around the continent, and really deeply entrenched in its multiracial politicization of issues, and gives a really rich new flavor to African politics that differs from most that occurs in the other parts of Africa. And so I think this was a really explosive comment, but I don't know, what do you guys think about these thoughts? As usual, share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching, guys. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Please share and like and subscribe, because that's the way you support Kwazemi as a channel, an Afrocentric channel, where we try to understand deeper issues in African history and hopefully develop a collective intelligence on how we wish to build the Africa we want to see as people of Africa. See you in the next one.